Hi guys. Hope everyone's doing well and that you're staying current with our class schedule. As of as the schedule per the syllabus, we're now in week 11. We skipped ahead last week. We skipped ahead to Jacques Barazon and we discussed the coming age. And we discussed the essay. Before that was Andrea Elliott's A Muslim Leader in Brooklyn, Reconciling Two Worlds. This week, we are focusing our attention on the essay by Barbara Ehrenreich called Maid to Order. But before we get into that essay, I just want to remind you, I did mention that I wasn't sure whether I was going to give you the homework for next week, but I would like to assign for next week on the week 12 to read. You don't have to summarize this essay, but just read through it. Alan Turing's Computing Machinery and Intelligence on 478. So I'm going to cover that next week. So we're going to be caught up by next week. And let's just take a review of the schedule as we have it now. As per the syllabus, a class ends on May 12th. And now, as we speak, I'm also currently entering in the midterm grades that I have for you at this point, and which includes your midterm essay. It includes essay 2, essay 1, summaries, and if you have, for those of you who've written your research paper 1, that will all go into the tally of your midterm grade. That said, there's still quite a few of you who have not turned in research paper 1, and some of you are still missing the uploaded link. We haven't submitted essay number 2. So I'm going to remind you to keep working and keep working on uploading and writing those essays, okay? So today, also next week, I'm going to introduce to you research paper 2 topics, which would include what I was initially going to do and maybe some other alternative topics for you to do, okay? So for this week, we're talking about Maid to Order, the politics of other women's work. And this is under the chapter of economy, economics and business. So I have a particular lesson plan that I'm going to follow for this lesson. So the objectives for today are to utilize group discussion or this interaction through video podcasts to arrive at a critical analysis of the topic Made to Order by author Barbara Ehrenreich. We're going to review key points and definitions of terms contained in the article. We're going to explore the author's journalist investigation through a student exercise focusing on the big business of housework and the current economy. And so let me review this to summarize the article. In the article Made to Order, author Barbara Ehrenreich talks about the growing trend of hiring household help, the maid service, or cleaning ladies or cleaning men and women who do cleaning services. In the past 2 or 3 decades, housework has gone from being strictly women's work to having a slight help from the men to being the work of someone deemed of lower standards. Though nowadays, hired help is made up of both a great deal of men and women and has become a big business such as Mary Maids. Let me give you a little bit of background of the author, Barbara Ehrenreich. She considers herself a social democrat. She deals primarily with economic and social issues. Her initial training was in the sciences, and then she began to write books that dealt with disciplines ranging from sociology to economics to public policy. She is in 2006 founded United Professionals, an organization dedicated to the concerns of educated workers who find their lives disrupted by forces beyond their control. So she is a writer who's engaged with social issues and economic issues and economic and business related um, concerns of the worker. So before we get into the text of some of the, let's just review some basic terms that the essay uses. Okay. So in the essay, the Maid to Order, Barbara Ehrenreich utilizes a few different terms, and I'm going to go over these terms first, and then we'll talk about the specifics of the essay. So the first term that she uses is class polarization, which is a Marxist term. And class polarization describes the historical process of the class struggle pushed to two ends, rich and poor, without a middle class. Um, Class polarization has a long history, and its current manifestation, we can see this in terms of the types of people. For example, in this current day and age, in the age of COVID, one of the things that determines class and the process of class polarization is who is the workers who are deemed necessary to work, who are or employed in necessary businesses like fast food or pickup restaurants or shopping centers. The people who work in your ShopRite or grocery store. They may not necessarily make a lot of money, but they're certainly deemed essential workers, and a lot of times those people are are probably at a they're on the one hand they're at a disadvantage because they cannot work remotely from home because their work depends so much on actual being in the presence of being in the actual work environment, as opposed to working remotely with such like I'm doing right now. The other term is Marxist, follower of a socioeconomic philosophy that class relations and social conflict is developed by Karl Marx. Karl Marx is well known for having written his major work is Das Kapital, and also a Communist Manifesto and other works. And he wrote about class struggle and the history of class struggle, and that the critique of a capitalist system. The feminine mystique, or I'd like to spend a little time talking about the history of feminism, or another way of saying it is the women's movement. For women, movements for political, economic, personal, and social equality of sexes and professional opportunities for women that are equal to those for men. And the founder, the writer of the feminine mystique was a woman named Betty Friedan. So let's think about, for example, the history of the women's movement as we know it today, going back to, let's say, the year 40 something, when the United States entered into the World War II. So think about at this time, at the United States entering into the war against Germany, think about who all the men who were enlisted in this war, in the World War II, were servicemen who went into the war, and the whole nation was engaged in at that time in an effort to shift from domestic labor products to efforts that other companies, other factories began to supply manufacturing supplies for the war effort. And so, who do you think really took a lot of those jobs for the manufacturing of war materials? It was most likely a lot of women who were. The need was there for a great deal of women to work in these factories. and like war supplies, war uniforms, helmets, weapons, munitions development factories, and so forth. Like similarly today, we see what's happening with the COVID virus is a lot of companies that are like Ford and the automotive companies who see the great demand for ventilators. They're shifting their focus from making their products that they are known for, and then shifting it to a bit more of a demand for ventilators, masks, visors, and so forth. Um, so now, when you think about in World War II in the 1940s, I don't know, I don't recall exactly the date that America entered the war, but somewhere around 1940, early 1940s. Um, that So when the war ended in 1945, I think, or the men came back from the war, and there was a displacement. The men resumed their work in the public sector, and women returned to the home and the home sphere or sector, and there was a whole generation that was born out of this called what do you think what was the generation that followed this? There was a spike in birth rates at that time, and this was known to be the boomer generation. Our current older parents or your grandparents are members of that generation. And the women's movement really essentially came through the um, the desire to level the playing field between what men earned and what women earned in the workplace. So once stability returned to the United States after the war was won, um, the um, the economy went through a boom, was surge, economic development was high, unemployment was low, and therefore there was also perhaps a desire in many women's lives to return to work and to assume positions in the workplace that were more lucrative, more financially uh, more pay for. But the problem that Barbara Ehrenreich points out is that 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 the who is going to take care of the household responsibilities if women were leaving the home sector to go to work. Well, that's where you had a kind of a solution. You had the solution of the cleaning services came in to handle and to clean where when both parents began to work, and the other term which I'd like to use the essay uses is called the Fair Labor Standard Act. Establishes a minimum wage, overtime pay, and child labor standards affecting full-time and part-time workers. This is an organization. This is an act that established more of equitable pay for affecting women and part-time workers, or full-time and part-time workers. And the term now is the National Organization of Women. So another term that's used a lot in, let's say, women's studies programs or uh, women's movement was this term called the glass ceiling, and this is a term that it's not in the essay that you read, but it's a term that's used to describe the plateau of where women who are entering into the workforce, who are rising up the corporate ladder, or in a corporate environment, would see themselves, their pay and their positions level off, as opposed to exceeding the pay and the positions of men. They are kind of so there's a call to break through the glass ceiling, which is to break through the pay barriers and the position barriers that were prevalent at the time. So one of the things that you should consider, we've covered the women's movement of the 60s and 70s. What was the division of housework based between men and female partners? Well, women working outside the home were also working inside the home. So oftentimes they had to do these two things at once, because the expectation was still there that even though women who worked outside the home still had to take care of the household, both in terms of raising the children and keeping the house in order. So in contrast, in 2018, what is the change in the percentage of housework performed by the female and the male partner if there is no hired household to help? Think about your own homes and your own households. Think about the division of labor, or who does what, and how that's whether or not that's equitable, or do you think that it's still on the shoulders of women to do most of the work? What do you think? And the impact of gender equality. What impact does it have on the equal split of work by partners? In a typical household, how much housework is performed by female partner and by the male partner? Sharing of housework by families, parents, and children contribution to chores. What percentage may be the contribution of the children in such a household? What are the pros and cons when the floor scrubbing and toilet cleaning was no longer a part of the job description that men are expected of their wives? What were the effects with parents working longer hours and children are more involved in school activities? Think about what would be the impact of social and economic losses to the poor in corporate America if the outside household services, Merry Maids, were not used. The Fair Labor Act standard were extended to housework in the 1970s. What are the issues of class and moral standards? Are big corporations taking advantage of those who are desperate to find work or to get into jobs such as housekeeping for an unfair low wage? Think about the questions: does this household service prolong the existence of a servant class? What are we losing when we are not doing anything for ourselves? Meaning, what are we losing when we rely too much on the services of a cleaning company or a maid service? Are the children in families with hired household help being raised with the attitude that people that clean up after them are lower than everyone else? Meaning, is there kind of a class consciousness at play when hired help is there's a hired help in a family or in a household, that they are deemed less on the hierarchy, social hierarchy? Are there differences in how the very wealthy tip the way the middle class tips? How do these tips to hire household help compare to other services such as grocery shopping, pet care, walking, babysitters, delivery services, or Uber drivers? Uber drivers nowadays are also in a situation where, because they are ubiquitous now, the service is ubiquitous, that their job is primarily based on not only the wage they earn, but primarily the tips that they earn as well. Think about housework as a power struggle within the home among family members, and as a class struggle between the rich, middle class, and the poor. Here, for example, is the self-contradictory position of NOW, which is the National Organization for Women. On the one hand, improved wages and working conditions will attract more women to the field of household help, and the demand for household help will increase while women seek occupation outside the home. So, like I said before, It creates a kind of there's a vacuum in the house for help to be had for the maintaining of household duties when both parents work in the house. Um, and the cleaning lady then is viewed as a sort of a de ex machina, which is Greek for God from the machine to restore the peace in the chore wars. All right. Um, Finally, I'd like you to think about this particular activity. Miss Ehrenreich states that feminism did not make household work irrelevant. Rather, household work became a big business due to the expansion of capitalism. Based on reading the article, think about what you would do if you were to essentially do a startup or a venture capitalist startup company think about a service that you would provide for people today. For example, think about the current situation with COVID-19, where sometimes people, there's a certain segment of the population they can't go to the store. There are people like newspaper delivery people who do this for free, who deliver groceries for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to go to the store. Think about services that could help other people in these circumstances, and think about like an app or something that you could develop. So if you think about that, think about the important thing is to think about your app as in terms of not only the service it provides, but what problems it may solve and what issues may be created with the impact on the community. As families, social, economic strata, layers of society, rich versus poor. And then make a list of the problems that you are solving by the services you provide and description of the users whose problems are being solved or on the contrary being increased. And more importantly, describe the part of the labor force that would be interested in willing to work for you. Think about the pay rate, or minimum wage, tipping benefit, or think about services like dog walkers, for example, who use, an app called WAG or Rover, who rely on services like these apps to locate potential clients. A lot of those people now are not able to work because it requires contact with other people in close proximity, or to get to walk dogs. Um, He would elaborate. You could elaborate on the profit from the service, or determine the impacts it has on fair labor standards, the women's movement, unemployed, or if your service is impacted by these. All right. And then finally, what social and economic loss may occur if your service is not being utilized. Think about if you were to contribute to the effort now to help something. Like, for example, people are now. One thing that's happening now is that people are actually there's a need for donated blood, for example. If you were, what if you developed an app for the donation of, because people who've survived, who've had been tested for COVID and tested positive and experienced the symptoms, and when they recover, the body creates antibodies. So there's actually a need for people with these antibodies to do. The research people, doctors and scientists are researching the effects of these kind of people who donate their blood and have these antibodies in their blood. Think about other kinds of services that you could. That could help create an equitable work environment for both men and women in this particular troubling or difficult time. Like I noticed, for example, in my community, that there's a lack of toilet paper. What ways in which could you do to alleviate the current shortages of toilet paper? Could you go into how would you create it? Because there is a need for toilet paper, and in this time, especially so every time I go to the store, it's empty. that aisle is totally empty, right? So another thing is masks. Masks are also all out. They're all out of masks, and so think about how you could supply these things, and then how would you be able to manufacture them. So, and that wraps up today's session, and I look forward to talking with you this week for this lesson. Thanks.